Have you ever quietly paid for everything just because you're the successful one in the family? I had a $65,000 bonus, never lent it, never offered it, and yet it was gone. The truth is, in some families, your success turns into a silent bank account they think they can access anytime. They call it helping each other, but what it really is, organized overreach wrapped in love. I used to be the dependable sister, the one who covered bills, fixed emergencies, kept everyone afloat, until I realized I wasn't the safety net, I was the plan. This story isn't just mine. If you've ever felt like your kindness was mistaken for obligation, like saying no would make you the villain, this video is for you. I stayed quiet when they used my bonus to fund my brother's startup. No permission, no apology. But then I sent the first boundary letter of my life, not to get money back, but to reclaim myself. If you've ever been seen as the one who always figures it out, watch this until the end, because the longer you stay silent, the more they assume you're okay. And sometimes choosing peace starts with finally saying no. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now let's start the story together.
I wasn't even supposed to open it. The email landed in my inbox just past 4 p.m., hidden beneath HR's usual end-of-quarter noise. Wellness reminders, tax documents, stale invites to team trivia. It was CC'd to me, not even directly addressed. But something about the subject line caught my eye. Executive bonus confirmations, internal only. I clicked. Inside was a spreadsheet, the kind I'd helped format for the past 5 years, bonus disbursements by department, tiered by position. I scrolled down, past names I knew, then stopped. There was mine. Ava Holland, $65,000. I stared at the number for a while. Didn't smile, didn't gasp. I just stared. That number had weight, not life-changing, not headline-worthy, but it meant something. It meant that all the skipped vacations, the Saturday morning strategy calls, the endless, just one more Slack messages, they'd noticed, they'd seen me. I shut my laptop, tucked the printed brochure, thick paper, glossy finish, into my tote bag. It was for a small co-working studio I'd had my eye on for years. Natural light. Hardwood floors, just 10 minutes from downtown. I wasn't sure what I wanted to build there yet, but for the first time, I could afford to find out. At dinner that night, the lights in my parents' house twinkled like a Pinterest board come to life. Mom was finishing up her homemade baked ziti, which smelled like comfort and nostalgia. Dad was already at the table, glass of iced tea sweating beside his plate. Liam was on the couch, knees pulled up, talking about some app that would revolutionize real estate branding. I set the table like I always did, forks left, knives right, while nodding at Liam's pitch. Something about virtual staging for low-income housing. Or maybe it was AI property names. He had a whiteboard in his trunk, he said. He could explain it better with diagrams. That sounds ambitious, I offered. It's not just an idea, he said. It's the future. We're just finalizing the startup paperwork. That's when Mom chimed in. Oh, and we used your bonus to retain that lawyer you mentioned last year. What was his name, Martin Caldwell? I blinked. My bonus? Yes, she said breezily, like she was mentioning a grocery item. It just made sense. You weren't doing anything with it yet, and Liam needed the funds to lock in his branding team. My fork hovered above the pasta. You used my bonus? Dad sipped his tea, said nothing. Liam kept talking, something about launch timelines and social media traction, but his voice felt miles away. You didn't think to ask? I said, more quiet than angry. Mom shrugged. We didn't want to burden you with the details. It's not like you'd spent it. The room tilted slightly, like my seat wasn't level anymore. I looked at my plate but didn't move, not toward the food, not toward them. That wasn't your decision to make, I said. Calm, flat. Liam finally paused. Come on, Ava, you know I'll pay it back. You shouldn't have to, I said, voice still low, because it wasn't yours to borrow. I thought we supported each other in this family, Mom said, her eyes narrowing. That's funny, I replied, pushing my chair back, because somehow, support always seems to mean I pay the bill. Dear friend, what would you do if you were in my shoes? I bet you can't guess what's coming next. But before we go any further, drop a 5 in the comments if you're still with me, because what happens next might just leave you speechless. No one stopped me when I stood. No one asked if I was okay. Not Dad, not Liam. And Mom just went back to serving seconds. In the kitchen, she offered, "There's leftover salad if you want to take some." I shook my head. No thanks. You barely touched your plate. I wasn't hungry after all. I didn't say goodbye, just gathered my coat, my keys, and my tote. The air outside was sharp, cool against my neck. Austin was quiet that December evening, except for the distant echo of carolers in the park and the soft whir of traffic on South Congress. I sat in my car for a few minutes before starting the engine, staring at the folded brochure in my bag. It had a crease now, right down the center, like it had folded itself, retreating, or maybe like a door closing. When I got home, I placed the brochure on the table next to my laptop. Didn't open it again, not that night, maybe not ever. Instead, I poured a glass of wine and opened the family group chat. 30 unread messages, mostly from Mom, 2 from Liam, and 1 photo of the cat in a Santa hat. I hovered over the thread, thumb paused above the screen. Then I pressed mute. Sometimes silence is the only boundary people understand. No one said sorry, not for taking the bonus, not for assuming I'd be fine. They just carried on. The day after that dinner, I stayed home from work. I told my team I had a sore throat, but really, I just couldn't bear another round of artificial cheer and stale gingerbread cookies in the break room. The silence in my apartment felt cleaner somehow, more honest than the way everyone else pretended nothing had happened. I stood at my kitchen counter, staring at the cup of peppermint tea I'd made an hour ago. It had gone cold. I reheated it out of habit, only to burn my tongue on the first sip. I muttered something under my breath and left the mug next to the half-written holiday cards. My pen hovered over one of them. From Ava. But I paused too long, then put the pen down. I left it blank. The voicemail from Liam came in while I was reorganizing the linen closet. Typical. He never called. He sent voice notes, like a podcast I hadn't subscribed to. Hey, Ava, I didn't know they were going to do that. I didn't ask them to use your bonus. I mentioned I was getting stuck with legal fees, and I guess they thought they were helping. I didn't mean for it to, go down like that. He trailed off. No apology, no offer to fix it. Just a soft, passive sigh at the end, like he was the one burdened by the awkwardness of it all. I didn't reply. I replayed it once more just to be sure I wasn't imagining how light he made it sound. Then I deleted it. Maya showed up that afternoon with her usual knock, 2 short, 1 long, and a paper bag full of bagels and oat milk. She didn't hug me. She just handed me the food and took off her boots. We sat across from each other at the tiny kitchen table I'd thrifted from a church sale. I didn't even know where to start. They used it, I said flatly. $65,000. Gone. Just like that. Maya didn't blink. And they didn't even tell me until it was done. They just assumed I'd be okay with it. She tilted her head. Ava, this is theft. You're just used to calling it love. The words hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Maya had a way of cutting through things I hadn't dared name. I've covered rent, bills, co-pays. Their car insurance once, remember? HVAC repairs. Liam's credit card debt that one Christmas. I listed them like groceries, voice steady, heart tightening. I've been the safety net so long I forgot I was the one falling. Maya reached for her bag and pulled out a small business card, placing it face down on the table. She didn't say anything about it, just let it sit there between us. Later that night, I logged into the utility portal and hovered over the section labeled Auto Pay. The account number for my parents' address blinked back at me. I hesitated only a second before clicking deactivate. A little confirmation message popped up. Auto payment canceled. Changes will take effect next billing cycle. It was the first time in years I'd said no, and the sky didn't fall. That evening, I sat alone at the dining table, lights dimmed low, the only sound in the apartment the faint hum of the refrigerator. I thought about all the times I'd covered for someone, quietly, without receipt. The time I lent Liam rent money after his third roommate bailed. The replacement phone I bought Mom when hers broke. The groceries I had delivered to their house every Thanksgiving because I was so good with the online apps. And not once did anyone ask if I was okay footing those bills. Not once did someone offer to pay me back, or even ask if I wanted to be repaid. They assumed I had it covered because I didn't complain. I'd become the financial cushion, the emotional sponge. I walked over to the half-lit Christmas tree. A single gold ornament had fallen to the floor, rolling silently into the shadow of the couch. I bent to pick it up, holding it in my palm like something fragile, delicate. Maybe I used to think that's what family was supposed to be. Fragile and precious, even when it poked into you like glass. Back at the kitchen, I opened the drawer and pulled out the brochure for the co-working studio. It had been crumpled when I found it days ago, a deep crease down the center from being tossed around in my tote. I smoothed it out slowly. The photos still made my heart quicken. Soft lighting, clean spaces, a mural in the corner that looked like something I would have painted in high school, before life turned into budgeting spreadsheets and emergency fund withdrawals. I imagined myself sitting there, just working, quiet, uninterrupted. A space that was mine. The phone buzzed again, another text from Mom. Just a forwarded article about tax benefits for supporting adult children. No caption, no hope you're doing okay. Just content, as if that counted for conversation. I didn't respond. I powered the phone off and tucked it under the pillow. Later that night, I found myself pacing, thinking about Maya's words, her certainty, how she didn't flinch when she called it theft. Maybe it didn't look like a crime. There were no masks or break-ins, no dramatic confrontations, just a slow, consistent erosion of my consent, a pattern dressed up as responsibility. And I had played along, thinking it was noble. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat back down at the table, and for the first time in a long time, I made a list, not of what I owed others, but of what I wanted for myself. The studio space, a solo vacation, a week without the family group chat buzzing at 6 a.m. boundaries. Maya was reading something on her phone when I looked up. She caught my glance and smiled softly. "You're allowed to want something different, you know," she said. "Wanting peace doesn't make you selfish." I folded the business card in half, not out of disrespect, but like someone saving a page they meant to return to. I wasn't ready to call, not yet. But I'd stopped pretending I didn't want to. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my life back. But maybe those two things weren't as different as I used to think. It was New Year's week in Austin, and the city felt like it was holding its breath. Storefronts still clung to their holiday garlands, but nobody seemed in a hurry to take anything down. Even the traffic had slowed, like everyone was waiting for the world to decide what came next. Jordan Patel's office sat on the third floor of a quiet brick building downtown. The elevator opened to warm wood tones, brushed steel, and the scent of something citrusy and expensive. I checked in with the assistant, sat on a firm leather chair, and waited with the manila folder I'd labeled documents. My palms were dry, but my fingers wouldn't stop fidgeting. Jordan greeted me with a calm, even voice. He looked younger than I expected, mid-30s maybe, but moved with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't second-guess much. His office had a wall of books and one of glass, overlooking the stillness of downtown. I handed him the folder. Inside were screenshots of the HR email, my bank's bonus deposit, text threads with my parents, and a list of every significant gift I'd given the family over the last 5 years. HVAC repair, Liam's emergency credit card bill, a co-signed lease for Mom's new Camry. Jordan flipped through the papers silently, then set them down. "This is financial misappropriation," he said plainly. "We can move forward quietly or loudly. That's your decision." I blinked. "What does quiet look like?" "We draft a boundary letter," he said. "Revoke shared access. Document all prior support. It's not a lawsuit, it's a line in the sand." I nodded slowly. "And loud?" "Litigation. Press discovery. But most people don't want the drama, especially when it's family." "I don't want drama," I said, then paused. I want it to stop." Jordan didn't try to sell me anything. He slid a sample letter across the table. The font was clean, the language neutral but firm. As I read, something inside me loosened, like a muscle I hadn't realized was clenched. He handed me a pen. I signed. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of years lifting off me in ink. As I stood, I pulled out my phone and changed my emergency contact from Mom to Maya. Just one little setting, but it felt like rewriting the ending of a story. The busker on the corner played a slow, bending tune on a saxophone. I passed him on the way to the parking garage, and for a moment, I stopped walking. The song was something familiar, but I couldn't name it, only that it used to play on Sundays when Dad made pancakes, back when love felt less conditional. At a red light, I thought about how many times I'd let things slide. The birthday dinners I paid for because Dad forgot his wallet. The plane ticket I bought for Liam when he missed his connection. The emergency dental bill for Mom, even though she told the hygienist to mail it to me before she asked. And the worst part? No one even said thank you. They just moved on. Like it was expected. Like I was some kind of invisible insurer for their recklessness. Back in my apartment that night, I took down the half-decorated tree. The needles were dry and brittle, leaving sharp little splinters across my rug. I tossed the ornaments in their box, still wrapped in the tissue paper I'd never bothered to unwrap fully. Even the lights felt tired, like they knew they were just for show. In the kitchen, I heated a bowl of lentil soup Maya had left in my fridge. It bubbled quietly on the stove, fragrant with cumin and something earthy. I sat at the counter with my bowl and the printed letter, reading every word Jordan had typed. Each sentence felt like a sentence in reverse, undoing years of obligation I never volunteered for. My phone buzzed with a group text. "Movie night tomorrow? Ava, you in?" I stared at the message. It was signed with a winking face from Liam. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my notes app and started typing a list. I titled it, "Things I Paid For." HVAC repair, $1,200. Liam's car battery, $280. Prescription copays, $60 monthly. Wedding deposit I was never reimbursed for, $750. Mom's Bridge Club annual fees, $95. I wasn't angry as I typed. I was awake. This wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something that belonged to me. When I finally climbed into bed, I tucked the printed letter under my pillow. Not because I needed to read it again, but because it was the first time something with my name on it had truly felt mine. The next morning, I'd call Jordan to move forward, quietly but firmly. And tonight, for the first time in years, I slept without checking if my parents had texted. I didn't plan on going head-to-head with my brother, but fate and a shared investor shortlist had other ideas. The badge clipped to my blazer read, "Ava Lynn, Founder." The word still looked foreign next to my name, like it hadn't quite settled in. I smoothed my hair, pressed my lips together, and walked into the pitch prep room at Capitol Grove Co-work. It smelled like dry erase markers, ambition, and half-drunk cold brews. The walls were lined with posters of past winners. I scanned the room and stopped cold. Liam. He was in the second row, fiddling with his laptop, half listening to the moderator. He hadn't seen me yet. He wore the same navy sport coat he always did for things like this, same puff of overconfidence in his stance. For a second, it felt like I'd walked into the wrong room, the wrong life. Then the moderator cleared her throat and called, "Next founder, Ava Lynn." His head snapped up. I didn't flinch. I stepped forward, clicked to the first slide, and began. My voice didn't shake. I didn't fumble the transitions. I knew this concept, an equity-driven digital classroom management tool, better than I knew most people. By the time I wrapped, the moderator scribbled something on her clipboard and nodded. Liam's pitch came 3 slots later. He stammered mid-sentence when our eyes met. The room noticed. Afterward, in the hallway, he caught up to me. "Ava, what the hell are you doing here?" I raised an eyebrow. "Pitching, same as you. You're seriously doing this? Now? Why do you think I need a reason?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "You've never even—" "Exactly," I said. "I've never." I walked away before he could follow. That night, a text from Mom lit up my screen. "This isn't necessary. Let him have his moment." I didn't reply. Instead, I reread the event email. "Congratulations, Ava Lynn. You've been selected for the final showcase on Friday." Liam's name wasn't on the list. Friday came with brisk wind and the smell of kettle corn wafting from food trucks parked outside. I wore the slate gray blazer I'd once bought for Liam's college graduation, the one I never got to wear because I was too busy setting up chairs that day. Today, it was mine. The room buzzed with energy. Lights dimmed. Pitches flew by. When it was my turn, I walked to the stage without hesitation. I clicked through the slides, made eye contact with the judges, and ended with a question I knew they couldn't resist. If we can't build safe, inclusive classrooms online, what are we really scaling? Applause. Real, sustained applause. Afterward, a woman with a teal name badge and sensible shoes approached me. She introduced herself as a senior director at an ed-tech nonprofit. "Your platform," she said, "is clean, scalable, and perfectly timed for the districts we're working with. I'd love to discuss a pilot." I nodded. I'd love that. As I walked back through the crowd, my phone buzzed. "Liam. So now it's a war?" I locked the screen. No reply. I didn't go to the after party. Instead, I picked up dinner from a Thai place near my apartment, the one with the handwritten cash-only sign that never changed. As I waited, I thought about the timing of everything, not just this week, but every moment I'd let slide in the past, every silent nod, every unpaid recognition. Maya called just as I stepped into my living room. "Well?" she asked. "They liked it," I said, peeling the lid off my container. "One of the judges gave me her card. She said she sees real opportunity." Maya exhaled into the phone like she'd been holding her breath all week. "That's because there is, Ava. You're not just reacting anymore. You're building." We talked until my food was cold again, but I didn't reheat it. I just sat with it, savoring the win, the silence, the space I was finally claiming. Later that night, as I folded laundry, I came across a t-shirt from Liam's high school fundraiser, one I'd designed, printed, and paid for. It was faded now, the logo cracked and unreadable. I folded it neatly, then dropped it into the donation bag. I looked around my apartment, noticing things I hadn't before. The framed sketches of my app's wireframes, the stack of unread business books I no longer felt guilty for not finishing, a photo of me and Maya at Barton Springs, laughing with snow cones in hand, not a trace of Liam, not a single thing that wasn't mine by choice. At midnight, I finally opened my laptop. I created a new folder titled Q2 Investor Targets, dragged in the partnership notes, and labeled them with dates. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because my time was no longer a resource for others to spend. Because even if Liam thought this was a war, I'd already won the battle that mattered most. I finally saw myself as worth defending, and I wasn't giving that up. The next morning, I woke up early. Before the sun, before the city shook itself fully awake, I laced up my sneakers and went for a walk around the lake trail. The air was crisp, spring clean, and quiet, except for the occasional whoosh of bikes passing by. As I walked, I passed one of those startup posters taped to a lamppost. Founders don't wait. It made me pause. I used to think that meant hustle harder, sleep less, sacrifice more. But maybe it just meant don't wait to be chosen. Don't wait to be validated. By the time I circled back to my building, the sun had started to rise. Gold light streamed over the skyline, catching the glass edges of buildings in ways I hadn't noticed before. Back in my apartment, I brewed a fresh cup of coffee and sat by the window. I opened my email and saw a reply from the nonprofit rep. "Let's talk pilot details next week." I smiled, not giddy, not triumphant, just sure. I no longer needed permission to take up space. I just needed to keep going, and I would. The first voice memo came in just after I'd poured my second cup of coffee. "Ava, honey." Mom's voice was low, layered in that gentle disappointment she'd perfected over decades. "You're turning this into something it doesn't have to be. We're family. Families figure things out, not fight things out." She paused, just long enough to sound like maybe she was holding back tears. "We've always believed in you, but this is something else." I didn't play it twice. Instead, I opened my laptop, swiped through the tabs, whiteboard snapshots, prototype wireframes, my slide deck for the pilot pitch. The cursor blinked on the final slide. Empowering self-paced learning for high school seniors. The copy was clean. I was ready. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Dad. "Don't ruin the family's peace over business." Dad. Short, sparse, as if he'd borrowed the words from a distant uncle or a church bulletin. I stared at the message longer than I should have before placing the phone face down and sliding it under the edge of the keyboard. I wasn't angry. Not in the way I expected to be. I was tired. Tired of being the one they assumed would absorb impact, soften conflict, carry on quietly. The one who always made space so others could have their turn, their dream, their headline. That morning, my dev team, 2 brilliant college interns and 1 freshly graduated engineer, joined me at the co-working space Jordan helped me secure. Our pitch to the EdTech nonprofit was set for 10:30. The room buzzed with quiet energy. Laptops open, dry erase markers squeaking, coffee cups half full. I walked them through the platform demo. No theatrics, just clean logic. Function, design, reach. For the first time, I wasn't asking anyone for permission. I was offering a solution. When we finished, I stepped out into the hallway and called Jordan. Everything's submitted. The pilot pitch, the provisional IP, the documentation of past contributions. All of it. His voice crackled lightly over the line. "And you're sure you want this recorded officially?" "Yes," I said with a steadiness I'd earned. No more verbal agreements. No more, "we thought you'd be okay with it." "That's your line in the sand," he said, "and you drew it clean." Around 6 p.m., Maya showed up with takeout from our favorite Thai place and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my office chair. She didn't ask how I was, just dropped the bag on the table, pulled off her jacket, and said, "If you haven't eaten, I'm staging a wellness intervention." We sat on the floor, eating straight from the containers, the clink of forks against plastic the only sound for a while. "You did it," she said finally, nodding toward the contract I'd clipped to the fridge. The nonprofit had signed on for a 6-month pilot in 4 Texas schools. My name, my idea, was officially in motion. "Not yet," I said, taking another bite, "but I will." She raised her glass. "To the girl who finally said no." I clinked mine against hers. To the girl who finally meant it. Later that night, after she'd left, I sat cross-legged on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan spinning low and slow. The apartment was quiet, but not hollow. It felt aligned. That's when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it was a neighbor. Maybe someone had left a package at the wrong door. But when I opened it, all I saw was a delivery driver already halfway down the hall and a certified envelope sitting at my feet. I picked it up, turned it over. Return address: Law Offices of Cartwright and Dean. Inside, neatly typed on heavyweight paper, was a cease and desist letter from Liam's legal counsel. Apparently, my platform substantially replicated key themes and designs of his proposed but never developed educational app. I read it once, then again. Then I set it down, walked to the kitchen, poured the last inch of wine into my glass, and leaned back against the counter. Outside, the heat of May buzzed through the night air. Inside, I breathed. Let them send papers. Let them huff and scramble. I knew the truth. This wasn't about theft. It was about territory, and I was finally claiming mine. The letter didn't scare me. It insulted me. I sat at my desk, early morning light spilling through the narrow office windows onto a chipped white mug and yesterday's to-go container. East 6th Street murmured below. Slow cars, faster footsteps, the clang of someone unlocking a bike rack. Summer in Austin had come early. I forwarded the cease and desist to Jordan with a single line, "Handle this." 10 minutes later, she replied with a PDF attachment and no greeting. The subject line simply read, "Drafted response." Inside the document, she'd lined up every date-stamped invoice, Slack thread, signed NDA, and time-stamped prototype file. Jordan's style wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. "This isn't just weak," she wrote in her second message. "It's embarrassing for them." 2 days later, the letter was retracted. No apology, no warning, just silence. The kind of silence that used to sting. Now it just cleared space. By July, the pilot had wrapped. We'd hit our benchmarks across all 4 campuses. The data reports were clean. The feedback from teachers was actually warm. I sat across from a potential Series A investor at a cafe near the University District, pretending not to care that my hands were sweating. He'd smiled at me after the demo and said, "You've got something here. We're interested." I nodded, just once. "Good," I said. Later that week, I signed the preliminary documents. 85%. Mine. Not co-owned, not shared under some vague familial umbrella of, "We did this together." Mine. I walked back to the office carrying a paper bag of lemon poppy seed muffins I picked up on the way. There were still notes on the whiteboard, new feature ideas, sticky notes from the team, a quote someone had scribbled that read, "Build for today, but bet on tomorrow." That afternoon, I cleared my inbox. Most of it was junk. Automated updates, vendor offers, newsletters I forgot I subscribed to. But buried in the middle, between a meeting reminder and a post-pilot analytics report, was a message from Karen. Subject line, "You didn't have to embarrass him." There was no body text, just that. No greeting, no signature. I stared at it for a full minute before clicking archive. Not delete, just out of sight. I closed my laptop and stepped out onto the narrow balcony that overlooked a mural of a fox on a bicycle. Austin's weirdness, still alive and pedaling. That night, I went to a tech mixer near downtown. Maya tagged along, mostly for the free drinks and even freer people watching. She wore silver earrings that sparkled when she laughed, which she did often, at bad pitches, at awkward icebreakers, at the memory of my first MVP demo crash. Then I saw Liam. He was across the room, half lit in the glow of someone else's slideshow. He looked thinner, like ambition had taken up too much space and left little for the rest of him. He didn't see me, or maybe he did and looked away. Either way, I didn't walk over. I didn't feel vengeful. I didn't feel smug. I felt uninterested. That used to terrify me, the idea of being disconnected from them. But now it felt like peace. The following week, our app went live for public access. I watched the real-time dashboard tick up. A new teacher in El Paso, a district login from Galveston, a small comment thread started in San Marcos. They weren't major cities, not yet, but they were real. In the quiet after launch, Maya brought over a bottle of sparkling cider and 2 plastic champagne flutes. "Because we're still classy on a budget," she joked, and I laughed harder than I expected. We toasted on my tiny office balcony, surrounded by succulents and the low hum of downtown traffic. "I know you wanted peace," she said after a moment, "but you earned this fire too." I nodded. I used to think I had to choose, be soft or be strong. Turns out I'm both. As the evening faded into orange light and office windows blinked out one by one, I opened my laptop one last time. I stared at my screen, not with dread, not with urgency, but with ease. I went to my inbox, paused over the folder labeled Family, then dragged it to Archive. It asked me if I was sure. I clicked yes. Then I opened Next, and in that quiet space between the past and what comes after, I let myself smile, small, unhurried, unafraid, because for once, the next step was mine alone, and I was ready for it. Some journeys aren't about walking away from others, they're about walking back to yourself. The day I sat quietly in my small office, a slice of lemon pie in hand and nothing left to prove, I realized I was no longer living someone else's version of me. I used to believe that keeping the peace meant keeping quiet, but real love, real family, shouldn't cost you your voice. Sometimes setting boundaries is the most loving thing you can do. Forgiveness is a gift, yes, but it doesn't always have to come wrapped in silence. If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Because sometimes all it takes is one honest story to remind someone else they're not alone. And if this story spoke to you and you believe in quiet victories, personal growth, and stories that matter, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more ahead, and I'd be honored to share it with you.